Hello everyone and Assalamu alaikum. This is Introduction to Psychology Part 1 PSY 312 by Dear Knowledge. Okay, it took me a lot of time to upload a new video due to my extra busy routine. Apologies for the delay. In this video, we will start with the lesson 2, part 1 of the lesson 2. Basically, lesson 2 is a bit long, so I decided to divide it into different parts, and each part cover the whole topic. In this video, we'll discuss about the perception of shape, and under the topic of perception of shape, we will discuss about figure-ground relationship, and in figure-ground relationship, we will discuss a sequence of perceptual experiences and then salient characteristics. Let's start with today's video, the perception of shapes. Now, in this video, we'll discuss under the topic of perception of shape is what is it? Like when you see something, you first notice its shape, and the first question that appears in your mind is, what is it? To identify an object, we rely primarily on its shape and what is the figure-ground relationship and what is its significance and what perceptual principles do we follow in determining figure-ground relationship. So we will discuss and we will answer all those questions in this video. So when you look around your world, you don't see random edges, curves, or colors, or splotches of light and dark. Rather, you see countless distinct objects against a variety of backgrounds. So, although to some degree we rely on size, color, and texture to determine what an object might be, and we rely primarily on an object's shape to identify what actually it is. And this tendency is evident at very early age and become even more pronounced as we get older. A clever series of experiments demonstrated the importance of shapes in object identification. 3-year-olds were shown a blue wooden object like the one that is shown right here. That is depicted right here in front of the screen that you can see. So the experimental told the children that the object was a dax, and then the children were shown a variety of other objects like those depicted in the picture B and C. So some of objects had the same shape as the dax, the picture A is. But they were made of different materials or were a different color or size. And then other objects were identical to the original dax in every way except that they were shaped a little differently. And the experimental asked the children which of these objects was a dax. It turned out that as long as the object had the same shape as the original dax, the children identified it as a dax. So now here you'll know that when we identify an object, so we first rely primarily on its shape. Now, the next topic which we will be studying under the perception of shape is figure and ground relationship. So this is a figure and ground relationship, figure ground relationship, and figure background relationship, and figure and background relationship. So the name may vary, but the topic and the theory is same. I have included definition of figure-ground relationship. The definition is a Gestalt principle of perceptual organization that states that we automatically separate the elements of a perception into the features that clearly stands out, which is the figure, and is less it is less distinct and its less distinct background, which is the ground. So this is the figure ground relationship. Now, first of all, whether we focus on a desk, a desk or a duck or some other objects, so how do we organize our perceptions so that we see the objects as separate from other objects? So the early Gestalt psychologists identified an important perceptual principle which is called figure-ground relationships, and which describes how this works. When we view a scene, we automatically separate the elements of that scene into the figure, which is the main element of that scene, and the ground, which is the background. Now, you can express the figure-ground relationship by looking at a coffee cup that is on the table. So the coffee cup is the figure and the table is the ground. Now, perceiving a figure against a background is perhaps the fundamental organizational tendency, and figure of objects are perceived as standing out from the general background or of our experience. So the Gestaltist opine that perception is always relative to figure and ground and a primitive form of organization. So the perception of a form or figure is never absolute or free from its background. For example, when we see words on a page or painting on a wall or bird flying in the sky, so the words, the painting, and the bird stand out from the background and are perceived as figures, while the page, wall, and sky stay behind the figure and are perceived as background. The separation of scene into figures and ground is not a property of the actual elements of the scene you're looking at. Rather, your ability to separate a scene into figure and ground is psychological accomplishment. And to illustrate, look at the picture which is shown right in front of you. Now, this perception of a single image, any perception of a single image into two different ways is called figure ground reversal. Now, figure and ground is a psychological phenomena. Now, here artists such as MC Ister have used the principle of figure ground reversal to produce some intriguing effects, which you can see right here in this photograph. Now, in nature, ambiguous figure and ground relationships are quite common, and many insects and animals have marking the act as natural camouflage and prevent their detection by the predators. And when an animal blends in with its background, a predator cannot distinguish the animal, which is the figure, and from the background, which is the ground. So, in much the same way, military personnel and equipments are often concealed from enemy forces by clothing that are designed to blend in with the terrain, whether it be jungle or desert. So this is how it can be applied, particularly in our life. Now, according to Rubin in 1921, uh, uh, Rubin in 1921 has attempted to analyze perceptual experiences and explain figure and ground relationships. And according to him, perceptual experiences follows a sequence, as you can see, as you can read right here. So one of is that on stimulation by a stimulus, a state of awareness is aroused, and it is followed by a finding out the interrelations among several stimuli in the stimulus field. And then it again follows the differentiation of immediately present stimulating conditions from other stimuli. And finally, as a result, the object stands out as a clearer and structured figure against the remaining elements that form the ground. Now, there were some other salient characteristics of the figure-ground relationships, which was given by the Rubin. What Rubin actually did, that Rubin has further elaborated this relationship between figure and background, and mentioned certain statements, certain salient characteristics of figures that appear distinguished from the ground, and these are as follows. Now, the first one is that ground forms the basis of a figure on which a figure appears as standing out, and the figure have some sort of shape or form that possesses the object's quality, that is the characteristics of the object or thing. But the ground is relatively formless, that is that it possesses no object quality, and figure appear nearer to the perceiver, while ground appear distant, and figure is more impressive and meaningful than ground, and figure appears in the front and ground behind the figure, and ground appears extended behind the figure, which Kafka terms it as double representation. Now, the area of figure being limited can be more easily and definitely localized than the extended ground, and the figure have surface texture, while the ground have filmy texture. And the contours separating figures from ground belong to the figures and not to the ground, and hence contours are perceived in figures. The last salient characteristics of the ground figure and ground relationship is figures remain in the center of the consciousness and therefore are more stable than the ground, which falls in the peripheries and not in the center of consciousness. Yes, the last one. The physical energies within the figure is much more dense than the ground, and therefore the cohesive forces dominate. And consequently, differentiation of the elements of a figure is difficult, and this makes the figure appear more structured and well-shaped than the ground. So these were all about the salient characteristics of the figure and ground relationship. So if I just give you a small summary of the figure ground differentiation in perception. So as we have already discussed, a figure is perceived perfectly only due to the background, and in figure and background relationship, figure is more prominent on the basis of its ground. So as you read the words of this presentation right here, the white background of this presentation or this slide is the ground, and the words which you're reading right here is the figure. So it is only the background, it is only that the background is clear that the figure can be seen properly, and perception of objects in the environment in terms of their color, size, and shape depends on the figure and ground relationship. And we usually perceive a figure against a background, and sometimes we may perceive a background against a figure depending upon the characteristics of the perceiver as well as the relative strength of a figure and ground. So in figure and ground relationships, there is also the reversible background, in which sometimes a figure becomes the background and sometimes the background becomes the figure, which you might have seen in one of those slides. You can see right here. Um, uh, this is the reversible background, in which sometimes the figure becomes the background and sometimes the background becomes the figure. So if you pay attention to the white part, you might see a vase, or if you pay attention to the black part, you might see two people facing to each other. So this is a reversible background. Then this reversible figure showing white vase and the black background, but black faces have been given by the Rubin. And according to the principle of figure and ground relationship, perception can be organized very easily, which may further lead to meaningful patterns of or forms. So this was the end of the video. If your concept is clear, you can like the video. If not, you can ask us in the comment section, and we will be happy to help you out. Plus, if you're new to this channel and you want to stay notified of the upcoming videos, you can click on the subscribe button, click on the bell notification, so you will never ever miss any notifications from their knowledge from our channel. You can also share the link of this video with your family members and friends, because sharing is caring. Until then, Allah Hafiz.